I've told this story exactly twice. Once to the police, once to my brother. After that I stopped, because people either didn't believe me or they looked at me differently afterward. Both reactions made me feel worse, so I just stopped bringing it up. My name is Marcus. For about 8 months when I was 23, I worked the overnight shift at a gas station off Route 9, about 12 miles outside of a town that barely qualified as a town. I needed the money, and I didn't mind being alone, which were basically the only 2 requirements for the job. The owner, a quiet man named Gerald, showed me how to run the register, handed me a key, and that was pretty much the extent of my training. Most nights were exactly the same. I'd come in at 11, relieve whoever had the evening shift, and then just exist in that buzzing, fluorescent silence until 7 in the morning. A few truckers. The occasional insomniac buying lottery tickets. Long stretches of absolutely nothing. I got good at killing time. I read a lot. I learned how to sleep sitting up without fully losing consciousness, which sounds impressive until you realize how depressing it actually is. The night it happened was a Tuesday in late October. I remember it being cold, that specific kind of sharp early winter cold that feels personal, like it's aimed at you. I remember, because the heating unit in the store had been making a grinding noise all week, and Gerald, being Gerald, hadn't gotten around to fixing it. So I was wearing my jacket indoors, which already had me in a bad mood. It was around 2 in the morning. I hadn't seen a single customer in over an hour. The door chimed and a man walked in. He was maybe 40, white, medium height, wearing a dark canvas jacket with the collar turned up. Normal enough at first glance. I gave him the standard nod and looked back down at my book. He didn't grab a basket. Didn't head toward any of the aisles. He just stood near the door for a moment, and I could feel him looking at the store the way you look at a room when you're counting the exits. It bothered me a little when it shouldn't have. He eventually drifted toward the drink coolers at the back. I listened to his footsteps, which is something you start doing automatically when you work nights alone long enough. You track people by sound. His were slow, unhurried in a way that felt deliberate rather than relaxed. He came up to the counter a few minutes later with a bottle of water and a pack of gum. I started ringing him up. "Slow night," he said. "Always is," I said. "You here by yourself?" I looked up at that. People asked it sometimes, just making small talk. But because of the way he asked it. Flat. No smile behind it. "Managers in the back," I said. I'd learned to say that in the first month. He nodded slowly. "Right." He paid in cash, exact change, and stepped away from the counter. I thought he was heading for the door. He stopped about 6 feet away and stood there, facing the window, like he was looking out at the parking lot. I put my hand on the phone under the counter. "You need anything else?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. When he turned around, something had changed in his face. The small talk version of him was gone. "Open the register," he said. There it was. He had one hand in his jacket pocket, and he was holding it in a way that was meant to suggest something was in there. Maybe there was. I didn't know. My brain did that thing where it splits. One half going completely cold and logical. The other half dissolving into static. "Okay," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Okay. Just take it easy." I turned to the register. My hands were moving, but I wasn't really directing them. I was thinking about the phone. I was thinking about the fact that Gerald, cheap as he was, kept almost nothing in the drawer. Policy was to drop anything over 50 into the safe every hour. I was thinking about whether that would make this man angry. I got the drawer open. He came around the side of the counter. That was when everything went wrong. He got close enough to see the drawer and something about what was in it. The thin stack of bills, the mostly empty tray, made him react badly. He grabbed me by the collar and shoved me hard into the shelving behind the counter. Cigarette cartons rained down. I hit the edge of a shelf with my shoulder, and the pain was white and immediate. "Where's the rest?" he said. He was close enough that I could smell him. Sweat and cigarette smoke and something chemical underneath. "That's it," I said. "That's everything. I swear." He hit me. Not a movie punch. A real one. Short and efficient. It snapped my head to the side and turned my legs briefly to water. I grabbed the counter to stay upright. My ears were ringing. He was saying something, but I couldn't fully track it. My vision had gone swimmy at the edges. He grabbed my jacket again, and I did the only thing I could think of. I reached back with my free hand, grabbed the first thing I touched. A heavy ceramic mug from next to the coffee machine. One of those thick diner ones. And I swung it. I caught him somewhere on the side of the head. Not hard enough to do serious damage, but hard enough. He stumbled. His grip loosened. I stepped back and I said it loud. "The way you commit to something. I have a gun behind this counter and I will use it." I didn't. There was no gun. He looked at me. His hand was still in his jacket pocket, but he'd stopped moving. There was a cut above his ear from the mug. A thin dark line starting to track down toward his jaw. We stood there for what felt like a long time, but was probably 4 seconds. Then he left. He walked out the door. Fast but not running. And I heard a car start and pull out of the lot hard. Tires giving a short bark on the cold pavement. I called 911. I sat on the floor behind the counter while I waited. There was blood on my lip. Already swelling. My shoulder felt like someone had driven a nail into it. The police came. They took a report. They seemed optimistic in that professional way that means they're not optimistic. I never heard anything after that. No arrest. No follow-up call. Nothing. He just drove away into the dark and disappeared. I quit 2 weeks later. Gerald tried to talk me out of it. I didn't have the energy to explain. And I do not work night shifts anymore. I guess I prefer being safe over being alone. I don't know if that's a loss exactly. Maybe it's just what it costs. I want to preface this by saying I'm not someone who gets scared easily. I'd been working nights for almost 2 years at that point. I'd dealt with drunks. I'd dealt with aggression. I'd had a guy try to walk out with a case of beer under his arm like I wasn't standing right there. I knew how to handle myself. I'm mentioning this because the thing that got to me that night wasn't fear exactly. It was the feeling of being completely powerless inside a situation that didn't technically qualify as dangerous. That specific helplessness. My name is Joel. This happened on a Thursday night in early November. It had been raining since before my shift started, that heavy sustained rain that makes everything feel underwater and muffled. The kind of rain that keeps people home. I'd had maybe 4 customers in 3 hours, and I was fine with that. I had a podcast going through one earbud. The heat was actually working for once. And I was having one of those rare nights where the solitude felt comfortable rather than oppressive. Then the door opened, and 3 guys came in out of the rain. They were in their mid-20s, laughing about something before they even got through the door, shaking water off their jackets. The kind of entrance that fills a room. I pulled my earbud out and gave them the nod. The tall one in front pointed at me the second he saw me. "Oh, no way," he said, grinning. "I know you. You went to Carver, right? Class of 2016? I did not go to Carver. I graduated from a high school 2 counties over." I told him that. He waved it off. "Nah, you look exactly like this guy I knew. Exactly like him. What's your name?" I told him. "Joel." He repeated it like he was testing the weight of it. "I'm Darius." He didn't introduce the other 2. They'd already split off into the aisles, and I could hear them picking things up and putting them down. Not browsing so much as handling. "You've been working here long?" "Couple years," I said. He leaned against the counter on his forearms. Easy and comfortable, like we were friends catching up. "That's dedication, man. I could never. I could never. I need people around me, you know. Being alone all night would drive me crazy. It's not bad, I said. One of the other guys, shorter, red hoodie, came up and put 2 drinks on the counter. He'd already opened one of them. I looked at the open bottle and then at him. I'm gonna pay for it, he said, smiling. I need you to not open things before you pay, I said. I'm gonna pay for it. Still smiling, I rang them up. He paid. Darius was still at the counter, still talking, telling me some story about a bar they'd just come from. I was half listening, tracking the third guy with my peripheral vision. He was over by the chip rack, and he'd pulled himself up to sit on top of the standing freezer unit next to it. Just perched up there with his arms crossed, watching the store like he owned it. Hey, I said, nodding toward him. Can you get down from there, please? He looked at me. Then he looked at Darius. Darius laughed. He's good, man. He's good. He's not gonna break it. It's not about breaking it, I said. I just need him off the equipment. The guy on the freezer didn't move. He smiled at me. A slow smile that didn't reach anything above his mouth, and stayed exactly where he was. Darius kept talking. That was the thing. He just kept talking, filling the air with noise. Stories about nothing. Questions he didn't wait for answers to. Red Hoodie was back in the aisles now, and I could hear him laughing at something. And I couldn't see what. The guy on the freezer had opened a bag of chips and was eating them one at a time, watching me. Still hadn't paid. I tried the direct approach. Guys, it's getting late and I need to start closing down some sections. I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. Darius looked wounded, closing down. It's not even 2. Prep work, I said. Store policy. You do prep work at 2 in the morning? He smiled. Come on, Joel. We'll get out of your hair in a minute. Dree, you find what you were looking for? I didn't hear Dree answer. I heard something shift and then a soft thud from the back aisle. Like something had been knocked off a shelf. I came out from behind the counter. This was a judgment call. Coming out from behind the counter meant giving up the barrier. But staying behind it meant I couldn't see what was happening in the aisles. I walked to the end of the aisle and looked. Dree was standing in front of the snack shelf. A row of granola bars had been swept to the floor and he was looking at them, and then at me with an almost curious expression. Like he was waiting to see what I would do. I looked at the granola bars on the floor. I looked at him. Then I walked back behind the counter and picked up the phone. I'm calling the police, I said. I wasn't performing it. I said it the way you state a fact. You have about 30 seconds to leave before I do. They went quiet for the first time since they'd walked in. Darius straightened up off the counter. Something moved behind his eyes, a quick calculation. And then he clicked his tongue and shook his head slowly like I'd disappointed him. That's cold, Joel, he said. We're just hanging out. I started dialing. He held up a hand. All right, let's go. They moved toward the door. I watched all 3 of them. Darius went first. Back out into the rain without another word. Red Hoodie followed, tossing his empty bottle somewhere behind him without looking. It hit a shelf and rolled. Dree was last. On his way past the end cap display by the door. A neat stack of motor oil I'd arranged at the start of my shift. He dragged his hand along it without breaking stride. 4 bottles hit the floor. He didn't look back. The door swung shut behind him. I stood there listening to the rain. I picked everything up. I wiped down the counter. I finished my shift. When my replacement came in at 7, I told her it had been a quiet night because I didn't know how to explain what it actually was. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. They never technically did anything. If I'd called the police in the moment, what would I have said? 3 guys came in, sat on my freezer, knocked some stuff on the floor, and left when I asked them to. That's it. That's the whole report. And somehow that was one of the longest hours of my life. I don't really know why I'm writing this down. Maybe because I've replayed it in my head so many times that I need it to exist somewhere outside of me. Maybe because I want someone to read it and tell me I wasn't wrong for being angry. Either way, here it is. My name is Renee. I was 26 when this happened, working the overnight shift at a gas station on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous. It paid $11.40 an hour, and the coffee machine was always either broken or burning. But it was consistent, and I needed that. I'd been doing it for about 5 months, long enough to stop being nervous about being alone at night, which, looking back, was probably the problem. It was a Friday, close to midnight. The rush, if you can call 3 customers in an hour a rush, had died down, and I was restocking the cooler near the back when I heard the door. I came up front and there was a guy standing at the counter, young, maybe 19 or 20, baggy clothes, headphones around his neck. He had the specific energy, like he was too confident in himself. He went towards the fridge where we kept sodas and grabbed a bottle of Mountain Dew. He put it on the counter and made small talk with me. Something about my job being boring. Asked me if I was alone. I was, but he didn't need to know that. Then he tilted his head to the side, a smirk forming on his face. He said, "Let me get this for free." Not asked. Said. I looked at him. "I can't do that." "Come on." He smiled like we were in on something together. "Nobody's gonna know." I said, "It comes out of my drawer if it doesn't ring up." That part is important to me. I want to be clear about it because people later acted like I should have just given it to him. Like it wasn't worth the trouble. But that's $2.49 out of my pocket. That's the principle of a stranger walking in and deciding the rules don't apply to him. Also, I wasn't expecting it to escalate like that. I thought maybe he didn't know that I would have to pay for it if he didn't. I've thought about this a lot. I was right to say no. He sucked his teeth. "Seriously," I said. "You want it. It's $2.49. He looked at me for a moment with this expression I can only describe as amused contempt. Like I was a minor inconvenience he hadn't anticipated. Then he laughed a little through his nose and said, "Whatever." He picked the bottle back up and I thought that was it. I thought he was either going to pay or put it back and leave. I turned slightly to check something on the register screen. That's when he reached across the counter and grabbed my chain. It was a thin gold necklace. Something my mother had given me when I turned 21. It wasn't expensive, but it was very special to me. He yanked it hard enough that the clasp snapped instantly, and the chain just disappeared into his fist. The pain was immediate. A hot burn across the back of my neck where it broke, and for a full second I didn't understand what had just happened. Then I did. I don't fully remember what I said. Something loud. Something that started with what and ended with a word I won't write here. I reached toward him on pure reflex, and that was when he threw the bottle at me. He threw it hard. A full overhand throw from maybe 3 feet away. I got my arm up, but not fast enough. It clipped the side of my head, the head just above my ear, and the sound it made on impact was wrong. A dense thud that I felt in my back teeth. I stumbled into the shelving behind me. By the time I got back on my feet, he was already through the door. I stood there for a second, in complete silence. The bottle had landed somewhere behind the counter, and the cap had cracked, and Mountain Dew was spreading across the floor in a slow, bright green pool. I had my hand pressed to the side of my head. I wasn't crying. I want to be clear about that too. I was just standing there, trying to locate myself. I called 911. The officer who came was polite and thorough and wrote everything down. He told me they'd follow up. I described the guy as accurately as I could. I had a lump forming over my ear, and a raw stripe across the back of my neck, and the specific sick feeling of having had something taken from you that you can't get back. I filed the report. I called a week later to check in. The officer I spoke to said they were still working on it. I called again 2 weeks after that and got a different officer who sounded like he was reading from a file he'd just picked up for the first time. He told me these things took time. I said okay and hung up. After 3 months, I stopped calling. The necklace never turned up. The guy was never identified as far as I know. The case, if you can even call it that, just kind of dissolved quietly into a system that had bigger things to deal with. I stayed at the job for another 4 months, which surprises people when I tell them. But I needed the money. I did start wearing my remaining jewelry differently, though. Earrings only. Nothing around my neck. The thing that still gets me. More than the bottle. More than the bruise that took 2 weeks to fully fade. Is the way he laughed before he did it. That little exhale through his nose. Like the whole thing was already decided, and I just didn't know it yet. Like my saying no was the funniest part of his night. I think about that laugh more than I should.